Hello everyone, I'm Mary Stone, and thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you to the New London Day and the Eastern Connecticut Chamber of Commerce for organizing these debates. My husband, daughter, and I have lived in Old Lyme for the last 21 years. Like so many small towns, this is a community that runs on the work of volunteers. In order to become part of my community, I got to work on the issues that make the most difference in our quality of life. My experience on the Board of Education, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Open Space Commission, as president of the Friends of the Phoebe Griffin Noyes Library, has taught me that to get anything done, you have to be able to work with other people. As a leader on these boards and others, I have learned our issues, our challenges, as well as our strengths. We do have a lot to accomplish in Hartford this term. Our economy still needs a lot of help. You will hear ideas from both candidates on this topic. This is number one on everyone's agenda. We want Connecticut to be as productive and attractive as possible. I look forward to working with each of you when you send me to Hartford. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Carney.
I want to thank you to New London Day and the Eastern Connecticut Chamber for holding this debate. I want to thank Mary Stone for agreeing to it, and I want to thank all of you here tonight who came to see it. I also want to say a special thank you to the retiring state representative, Marilyn Giuliano, who served us extremely well for the last 12 years. I hope that doesn't come to my time.
Maybe a little bit. Pick it up.
My name is Devin Carney, and I have lived in the district since I was 3 years old. Prior to that, I lived in a faraway land of Clinton, Connecticut. I'm a proud alumnus of Old Saybrook schools, and I went on to become the first person in my immediate family to receive my bachelor's degree from Brandeis University, which is one of the top universities in the country. Since then, I've had a diverse career in politics, including helping Carl Fortuna in his 2011 landslide victory. I've a diverse career in business, including starting my own voiceover business. I like to refer to it as the family business. I'm sure some of you know my family's been involved in the entertainment industry. My grandfather was Academy Award-winning actor Art Carney and famous Westbrook citizen. I've done all this while working part-time jobs to help pay the bills. I understand firsthand what many folks here in the district go through to keep up with payments and to keep up with bills, and that's a rarity for a politician. I live in Old Saybrook. As I said, my family is from Westbrook. My longtime girlfriend, Lisa Nefshield, lives here in Old Lyme with her two wonderful kids, and her daughter's a product of this school system, and she's being dropped off at Northwestern University tonight. Another fantastic college.
All right.
Time's
up.
Time's up. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. And from this point on, I would ask the audience to withhold their applause until the end. We congratulate both the candidates on the debate, because if we have a lot of interruption of applause and such, it eats up their time. So the first question goes to Mary Stone from our audience is, how do you plan to make the district and the state as a whole a more friendly place for job creators to flourish?
As I said before, this is everyone's number one issue. I believe that one of the first places we can start is with our system of taxation. We are relying on local property taxes to do things that our state government ought to be doing more of. And this puts the burden on the owners of homes and businesses. I think that with a system of taxation that is more fair, more equitable, we will become more attractive to more small business owners. I do believe that most business opportunities and employment opportunities are going to come from small and medium-sized businesses, not from large corporations. So whatever we can do to create the environment where these enterprises can flourish is certainly going to help create the jobs that we need in our communities.
Mr. Carney.
I think Job creation, to start off, we should avoid tax increases to businesses. We should also start rolling back some of the taxes, including the business entity tax, the corporate tax surcharge, and eliminating taxes on management services so that businesses can build and flourish. I would also look to eliminate the special assessment tax businesses pay on the money the state borrows from the federal government and stop the practice of overtaxing and overregulating. Businesses are simply fearful of expanding and hiring more people because of the uncertainty of higher taxes and the inability to budget for that. I would also look to improve transportation and mobility for workers. Let's take the special transportation fund and actually devote it to where it should be going, improving our roads, improving our rails, so that goods and services can get through this one end of the state to the other efficiently and quickly, and commuters can get to work on time. I would also look to create better training and education programs for in-demand jobs. We have a very educated workforce here in Connecticut, and there needs to be better training in the manufacturing sector, in the biotech sector, and the health services sector. And our schools should be better equipped to help people get into those professions.
Just to follow up to that, Ms. Stone, you said that you would target the property tax, a particularly burdensome tax, on small businesses and homeowners. If you reduce that tax, the revenues have to come from somewhere else. So I was wondering how you would change the tax system to make up for that loss in revenue if you can reduce the property tax burden.
I believe that the property tax poses a particularly onerous burden on senior citizens and those on fixed incomes who are trying to maintain their lives in their own homes here in Connecticut. And when we have to fund rising public school expenditures, which we do have to do, these do have to be funded, from property taxes mainly, this puts an unfair burden on people who can't afford the escalation in cost. So that's why I propose to shift more of the burden to sectors which are actually are not being asked currently to contribute their full share. I think that one of the first things we have to do is close the numerous corporate loopholes that seem to be handed out like candy. I think that these are unfair, and we need to create a climate of fairness and equality for businesses and homeowners. I believe there is additional revenue to be found. I don't think necessarily that our state government needs more money. I think that we need to spend the money that we send to the state more wisely.
And Mr. Carney, anything else on that, on this first question?
Ms. Stone was talking about property taxes rising. I think one way we should look at actually lowering property taxes is taking a look at the unfunded municipal mandates that are being handed down by the legislature, specifically the majority party. I would advocate for a 2/3 majority to vote on any unfunded municipal mandate with a careful consideration of the fiscal impact it would have on our small towns, because that right there is the number one reason for property taxes rising. So that's where I would look to lower that tax.
Okay, our second question actually follows up on something you mentioned, Mr. Carney, in your first answer. And the audience member notes that politicians running for office often talk about over-regulation. Could you specifically name some regulations that you would reduce or alter? And that's to Mr. Carney.
Some of the regulations I would look to reduce or alter are some of the taxes that are put down on our small businesses and our businesses. As I said before, the small business tax. That's a tax that goes ahead right when you want to start a business. It's $250 right off the bat. I think that's an absurd tax to put on a new person trying to start out a business. I would look at really giving businesses the opportunity to thrive and grow without the state telling them how to run their business. The only way that private enterprise can expand and grow is by doing it the way they know how. Job creators and business people focusing on growing jobs, growing the economy, and not the state telling them how they should run their business.
And Ms. Stone? Again, the question was on what regulations might you propose be either changed or eliminated to help businesses?
I don't know of specific regulations, but I will be finding out about them. I think that one thing we can do is create a climate in which people feel freer and more encouraged to make their ideas reality. This includes better access to loans, small business loans, and better access to well-trained employees. I do think that the programs that have been started to train people in new and emerging technologies are very encouraging. We should do more along those lines. One of the crippling costs to small businesses is the cost of energy, as well as the taxes that we've been talking about. Another that was mentioned by Mr. Carney earlier is access to transportation. This is something that our region lacks compared to other areas in Connecticut, and the 9 and now 12 town bus system, I think, is a very encouraging sign that things are moving in the right direction. It will give people a way to get to work between towns that does not rely on owning your own vehicle. I think this is very important to getting people, especially people of lower income, into jobs and working as productive members of society.
Okay, our next question goes to Ms. Stone. It's staying on the issue of our economy and job creation. The question is, what would be your 3 top legislative priorities to encourage economic growth and job creation in the state? I know you both touched on some, and this audience member would like to know, if you put them in order, what would be your 3 top priorities if you were to take office? And this is to Ms. Stone.
One of my first priorities is to straighten out the 3 huge educational mandates which have fallen on our public school systems in the last 2 years. Our school districts here in the 23rd have made enormous progress. They were early adopters of the Common Core standards, but there are things that need adjustment in these standards. It's too late to go back to the beginning, but we do need to make adjustments. The second 2 mandates, the Smarter Balanced Student Assessment and the new teacher evaluations, need a longer rollout time. The fact that all 3 of these mandates have descended on our schools at the same time means that teachers and administrators are buried under mountains of paperwork, taking them away from students. This is impacting the quality of our education. That would be one of my very first priorities. Another thing that I think, as I alluded to earlier, needs straightening out is how we fund public education. And the reason I'm putting so much emphasis on this is that in our small towns, between 60 and 80% of your property taxes go to fund your public schools. We need to find a different way. This model worked in the 19th century. It is not feasible in the 21st. Thank you.
And Mr. Carney, just to restate the question, I know Ms. Stone, she talked about education, and just to clarify, the questioner was particularly interested in prioritizing those top 3 priorities to try to generate more economic development in the state.
Okay. First off, I would look to generate economic development in the state. Our state is last in a lot of things that are good. 47th, according to CNBC, 47th the cost of doing business, 49th economy, 42nd infrastructure, 48th cost of living. We need to look at how we can fix all of those and actually improve our standing in regards to other states. First, the thing I would do to help businesses grow, I would improve the transportation. I believe that the Special Transportation Fund should go to bridge and road repair. 73% of Connecticut major roads are poor to mediocre, and that's not helping goods and services moving from one end of the state to the other. It's not good for commuters trying to get to work. If anybody's tried to get to work to New Haven, it takes a long time. And to New London, the same thing. I would also look at reducing the gas tax. The gas tax is the 3rd highest in the nation. Gas is the 4th highest in costs. It really makes us a pass-through state to a lot of businesses from New York, from New Jersey, from Massachusetts, from New Hampshire, and we really need to lower those costs again so that people can move goods and services from one end of the state to the other easily and efficiently. And finally, in terms of the economy, what I would do is I would eliminate those business taxes, like the small business entity tax, like the corporate tax surcharge, like taxes on management services, so that businesses are able to expand and grow without having to pay too much money to the government.
Ms. Stone, do you want to, you addressed education, perhaps you didn't hear the question, or you think the education is the economic driver, but I just wanted to give you another chance if you wanted to,
Sure.
to talk about kind of prioritizing as far as economic development.
Yes, I believe I mentioned earlier that we need to put more emphasis on training people for the jobs in sectors of the economy that are actually growing. And I point to the green and emerging technology sector in particular, but there are others as well, such as information technology. If we're training people for the right jobs, we can increase the total number of people employed. This is the goal, to get more employment, more people in productive, high-paying jobs so that they can afford to live here. I do think that although it sounds attractive to decrease the gas tax, we need a way to pay for these infrastructure improvements that we so desperately need. So we have to look carefully at what we're proposing. And not grab the first most attractive thing, but really look at what's going to make a difference in how we fund the improvements that we need. I also believe that when you look at taxes as a whole, you have to consider the impact that they have. Which taxes are most regressive? Which hurt people of low and fixed income the most? And we have to look at every tax and the part it plays in the whole. And I also think that we have to look at our state government, because the total amount of tax that we pay, as Mr. Carney alluded to, funds all the functions of state government. So we have to make sure it's doing the right things. And I think that the legislature has a tendency to add programs without assessing the programs that are already in place as to their efficiency and their benefits. We really need to take a comprehensive look at this government that we're growing. I don't think we need to grow it. I think we need to manage it better.
And Mr. Carney gave your opponent a second bite at the apple there. Is there anything you'd like to add on the question of economic priorities that what's been said?
No.
All right. Could our timers hold up the time for our candidates now? It might be a good spot so they can see what they're working with. And it looks like Mr. Carney, you got a little more time to work with, which is good because you get the next question. And it's about education. The legislature, in 2 sessions ago, passed a major education reform bill, which the governor is quite proud of in his campaigning. And the question I'd like to know, what is your opinion of the education reform? What do you think is working, and what would you seek to repeal or change?
I would look to repeal the Common Core state standards that were brought down upon us by Governor Malloy and Commissioner Stefan Pryor without going through the legislature, without much of a public hearing. I don't think that these schools in our district need the Common Core state standards. As I always say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And our schools are definitely some of the top schools in the state, if not the country. I think this was a misguided policy that really, it may work in some other areas, but it certainly won't work here in Connecticut. It was really put up by people that really don't have a grasp on education as much. It didn't go through teachers, it didn't go through parents. And it was never really field tested to actual students. And there's really no evidence that exists that supports the stance that the Common Core will raise our achievement, even for our most impoverished students, especially though not here in the 23rd District, in the towns of Westbrook, Old Saybrook, Old Lyme, and Lyme.
Thank you. Ms. Stone, I know you talked about some about your education priorities. Is there anything you want to add with this particular question about the education bill that was passed, what you like and what you would seek to change?
I believe that all of these reforms are necessary, but each one of them, each of the 3 mandates, is a huge multi-year implementation effort. To ask teachers and administrators to do this simultaneously in the same 3-year period is totally unreasonable, and it's really wrecking the quality of education that the students who are currently in our schools are getting, because they are not getting teachers' full attention or administrators' full attention. So I believe that it's one thing to hand down mandates, but the solutions for implementation have to come from the classroom up. So I believe that teachers and administrators working together have to submit reasonable plans of implementation to the State Department of Education. These need to be reviewed and adopted so that the ideas for actually doing the work come from the people who are doing it, are not mandated to them.
All right, anything else, Mr. Carney? Nope. Next question is Ms. Stone. I have to kind of take a deep breath, this is a long one here. The premise seems to be that the Democrats are being in control and you're a Democrat. That's sort of the preamble here to put this in context. The question, the state constantly ranks among the worst in virtually every national poll, taxes, affordability, etc. Your party raised state income tax by almost $2 billion last year. It might be a little high, but it was a big tax increase. And yet we are facing another huge deficit next year. Tell us why we should vote for you, since your party, the Democratic Party, is responsible for the deep financial mess we are in. And Ms. Stone, please, Ms. Stone.
When Governor Malloy took office 4 years ago, we had an enormous deficit. It was over $3 billion. This year there will be a small surplus. Next year there will be a deficit again of $1.3 or $4 billion. Much of this is due to debt service that we pay on money we borrow. I believe the debt service needs to be renegotiated. If it were, we could save hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, why should you vote for another Democrat? Because this Democrat came to the Democratic Party from the Republican Party. Because this Democrat sat on the Board of Education for 8 years during very contentious times in our town and drew up budgets that were passed the first time every single year by voters of both parties. We know how to do good budgets that make sense, that make proper use of people's money, that do not waste it on things that don't work. I think we can bring this sensibility to state government. Everyone, every Democrat acknowledges that there is debt that needs to be worked down. This is not a problem unique to us. The debt we inherited came from a largely Republican administration. Now we all have to work together across party lines to reduce it. It is not a Democratic problem. It is not a Republican problem. It is our problem. Let's work on it together.
All right. Mr. Carney, please hold applause. Mr. Carney, I'm going to ask you to say why that Democrat should be elected. Probably that's not going to be. But if you could attack that from the other end of the coin.
Well, like Ms. Stone, I actually switched parties as well. I am a former Democrat, now Republican.
It's interesting, isn't it?
But really, I think that the Democratic policies continue to put us into a hole that we cannot get out of, and these include such things as the busway to nowhere from New Britain to Hartford, which spent millions of dollars for a busway a lot of people really aren't going to use, and it should be focused more on improving our roadways, improving our rail system, and that was part of the majority party, that was part of the governor. And then another one is corporate welfare. Governor Malloy's First Five program has spent millions giving large corporations like ESPN and Bridgewater Capital, which decided not to take Governor Malloy up on his offer and wasted $15 million of our taxpayer dollars, which we cannot afford to waste, on clearing out property so Bridgewater Capital could move there. In addition, he gave the Lazy Burrito. I don't know if anybody ate there, probably not, considering it closed after a few months over in East Lyme. The governor decided to give that shop $75,000 without doing a background check on the owner, who owed over $400,000 on property in Fairfield County. And those are direct policies of the majority party, of the governor, and I think that we deserve, as a state, a more balanced legislature. And I'm not advocating to have it run by Republicans in a supermajority. I am advocating for equal representation, for a diverse chorus of voices that can bring about compromise, that can bring about the most, the best legislation possible for the entire state, not just for the Democratic Party leaders. And I don't know if my opponent would be able to challenge those party leaders, being a freshman in a large group. But I would always be an independent voice for the people of the 23rd, and as I have gotten the independent endorsement as well. And to me, it's not about party, it's not about Democrat or Republican, it's about the 23rd district. And I would do all I could to be the voice, your voice, of the 23rd district.
Before we move on to our next question, just kind of extending that discussion, Mr. Carney mentioned the governor's programs trying to provide incentives to businesses. We had the First Five program, we had the Small Business Express program, and the governor, when you talk to him, is quite proud of these programs. He feels that they are generating job growth and the economy is starting to pick up. Conversely, Mr. Foley, his Republican opponent, dismisses them as corporate welfare and says that it's not up to government to be picking winners and losers in that fashion. So, Ms. Stone, just to kind of elaborate what we've been talking about, do you support the approach for the governor? Don't you support it? How might you change it if you were a legislator?
When I'm a legislator, I will urge the governor and my party to adopt solutions that are more equitable for all businesses. Playing favorites is not going to get us the growth that we need. And I think that programs get tried, experiments get tried, and we see the results. I am in favor of programs that treat every business in a more equitable manner so that there are not a favored few and the rest left out. That being said, some experiments that are going on are worthwhile, and we need to see how they turn out. So I have stood in opposition to every party when it was necessary. I do what is best for the constituents I serve. I have done this on the Board of Education. I do this on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I do this on the Open Space Commission. I do this everywhere I serve. If it's in the best interests of the people you represent, that's what you do.
And Mr. Carney, exploring that also, the governor goes to the legislature and says, I'm competing with other states, and these other states are providing tax breaks, incentives, various programs to lure businesses away, and that's what I'm competing with. So you may call it corporate welfare, but I need these tools or these businesses go elsewhere. So if you could just talk about the fact, Connecticut is competing with other states to try to attract businesses.
Sure, but I think the focus should be on reducing the cost of doing business. It's the only real way to create sustainable long-term job growth and a sustainable improvement of the economy. I don't believe that picking corporate winners and losers, like the governor has done and like the majority party has done, is the correct answer. We need to set forth policies now that can compete with Massachusetts. I mean, Massachusetts is doing better than we are, and New York and New Hampshire. These states are taking away business because they are providing tax incentives to new businesses, but not doing it in the way we are by providing millions of dollars for one company to simply pick up from Westport and move to Stamford. I think that's not good business policy. We should have policies in place to make people want to stay here, to make people want to come here, that will be lasting policies.
All right, thank you. Mr. Carney gets the next question as we move to a different topic. Mr. Carney, do you support the gun law that was passed in the wake of the Newtown shooting, or should it be repealed? Short of repeal, what changes, if any, would you propose to the law?
I would, as a state representative, I would look to make some changes to the law. I think that there does need to be more in the law with regards to the treatment of folks with mental health illnesses in the state. We have closed down several of our mental health facilities, and I think that's wrong. Other states have really beat us in this area and have strong outpatient services for those with mental health needs and the families of those with mental health needs. And I think that we really dropped the ball on that one. I do think that it's important too that we keep up strong school safety standards to prevent a tragedy like what happened in Sandy Hook from occurring again. I do think that the bill attacked law-abiding citizens a bit too much, and I think setting arbitrary numbers for law-abiding citizens to follow. I mean, these people are already following the law. It's the ones who are not following the law that we really need to look out for. So I would look to better the policy towards folks, and we do have a strong sportsman culture here in the 23rd district, and I would look to make those folks feel more like they are the law-abiding citizens they are, and not like criminals because they missed a January 1st deadline.
All right, Dan, I'd really appreciate if we could hold applause because we want to get the candidates' time. Ms. Stone, your opinion of the gun law that was passed in the wake of the Newtown shooting, should it be repealed? Short of repeal, what changes, if any, would you propose?
I support the legal, responsible ownership of firearms. In those two words, legal and responsible, are a host of duties that gun owners owe to society. In return for the privilege of bearing arms, which is guaranteed to you by the Constitution, there are certain safeguards that need to be taken in the interest of the general population. One of these is registration. Registration is not tantamount to confiscation. You register your car, you register everything else of great value that you own. No one is going to confiscate it, but it is in the public's interest to know who has these weapons. I do believe that the law that was passed last year accomplished its basic function. Over 99.6% of owners of assault weapons in Connecticut registered their weapons by the deadline. There were only 200, as I read in the New London Day, who could not make the deadline or its extension. However, the ammunition law that was passed seems to be less effective, and I think that needs revision and a good looking at. I do believe, had I been in the legislature last year, I would have voted for this same legislation. I would have tried to fix certain imperfections in it, but we do need to register guns.
Thank you. Mr. Carney, just to clarify, Mr. Foley said if a repeal measure reaches his desk, he will sign it, though he really won't push for it. If it reaches his desk, he'd sign it. As a legislator, would you support a repeal? And if not a repeal, could you be a little more specific on what changes you might make to the current law?
Sure. I would look to make changes to the current law with its basis on the magazine capacity and the registration of firearms and the caliber that people in their own homes, this is a constitutional issue, and folks who are just simply following the Constitution should not be made out to feel like they are criminals in society. So I would look to reduce, to remove the magazine capacity limitations. I think 10 is just an arbitrary number, and I would also look to remove or extend any deadlines. I mean, January 1st, 2014 was a quick one, and I don't think it's fair that right after that deadline, folks would be made out to be criminals who the day before were perfectly law-abiding citizens. I think this bill missed the mark. The Sandy Hook occurred. This would not have prevented Sandy Hook from occurring. The guns in that case were not purchased by the perpetrator. They were purchased by his mother in a different state. And I think that it's important to look at how we can prevent that particular tragedy from occurring again. And I think in that case, you need to look at improving the mental health resources for people with mental health illnesses and their families, and also focusing on how we can improve our school security. The standards are technologically advanced. I think the school systems in the 23rd District have done a wonderful job in protecting children from any issues. And I do think, though, that the case sheds some light on that this can happen anywhere, and we really need to focus on preventing that. But I do not believe that those particular parts of the bill that took away law-abiding citizens' rights should still be in there. So I don't want to take out the mental health or the school safety portion, or even universal background checks, but I want to take out the things that will affect the law-abiding citizens who have every right to follow their constitutional rights.
All right, thank you. Any further rebuttal or comment on what's been discussed, Ms. Stone? Or are you good?
I agree that we do need to focus more on the mental health angle now. We've taken great steps in passing legislation for gun registration. Now we need to focus on who gets to buy a gun and what steps they need to do to prove that they are responsible enough to own that gun and use that gun. At the heart of every tragedy, we find a mental health problem that was not diagnosed or treated soon enough. And while we can't catch every problem, there are great strides we need to make. We cannot incarcerate ourselves out of the mental health problems that exist in the public. And I think when we start to address this, we're going to find that a lot of other solutions to social ills. So Mr. Carney and I are in agreement that a lot more resources need to be spent on prevention rather than trying to remedy something after it has occurred.
All right, thank you. Could we hold up our time cards to timekeepers when they do the math? Okay. All right. About a minute apart, not bad. And next question to Ms. Stone. Would you support or oppose an assisted suicide bill if it is introduced again in 2015? Why or why not? And that's to Ms. Stone.
I do support compassionate care to the dying. I believe that people who are terminally ill but otherwise of sound mind deserve to have the choice to ease their suffering. I believe that the bill that was presented to the legislature last year but did not pass due to time constraints had many provisions written into it to prevent any mistakes from occurring. I believe that there are safeguard upon safeguard upon safeguard in this bill. It is called compassionate care to the dying because it is compassionate and it does relieve human suffering. We have seen in other states where these laws have been passed that very seldom do the dying exercise this option. It does, however, give them comfort. I would fully support passage of such a carefully crafted piece of legislation.
Mr. Carney.
I would most likely oppose it. I do believe it could put undue burdens on the disabled community, who is terrified of the legislation. Folks in wheelchairs without extremities or capacities, and who have the help of personal care assistance. Someone might say that their life could lack function and utility and quality of life, and they deserve more than that. Seniors, how can we guarantee that assisted suicide won't be abused? What if an heir becomes greedy? What if an early stage dementia clouds the judgment? Dementia is a long process, and that's usually undiagnosed initially. So I would look to oppose it in those areas. I think that it could be a slippery slope. And I think it's interesting that our neighbors to the north, good old Massachusetts, actually held a vote, and they voted against it. And they're, from what I gather, more liberal than we are. And it is interesting that this piece of legislation did not even get out of committee. So the committee, which is run by Democrats, the majority party, did not vote to approve it. If it is for some reason passed, I would just hope that doctors, hospitals, and pharmacists would have the opportunity to opt out of it.
Ms. Stone, do you want to take the chance to rebut any of that, the danger it might pose to the disabled, the potential for abuse among seniors who become ill? If you could address some of Mr. Carney's contentions, why you would vote against it?
The bill that was presented last year, I did read the entire legislation. I found safeguard after safeguard to ensure that anyone who chooses to exercise this option has had thorough consultation with not only their own doctors, but family members, mental health professionals, to assure that they are of sound enough mind to make this decision. So the possibility of the disabled being put to death against their wishes, or the elderly, or those suffering from dementia being put to death against their wishes is non-existent. You have to prove you are capable of making this decision to some very stringent standards. So I believe that the objections that Mr. Carney raised do not exist. And I would support this legislation as a means to relieve human suffering in very extreme cases.
And Mr. Carney, can you envision a bill with enough safeguards that would satisfy you, or are you just against this idea and principle?
No, you know, I would most likely, as I said, be opposed to it. With the majority party in the legislature right now, as I said, if it would most likely, if it's given to them, it could pass. So I would just hope, as I said, that hospitals, doctors, and pharmacists would have the opportunity to opt out of it, because it does put an undue burden on those folks, and that's where I would stand on that.
All right, thank you. Next question, Mr. Carney. I know there's no major Connecticut cities in this particular district, but I think it's fair to say, as the cities go, is important to the state as a whole. And the question, returning to economic development, is there any particular ideas you might have that could try to address the high unemployment and the low incomes that we see in our urban centers? And we'll start with Mr. Carney.
I would look at better job training. I think it's important that folks find skills that they can put forward to highly skilled, higher paying jobs. So I would definitely look at focusing on that. I would hope to use what Rudy Giuliani did. It's called the broken windows theory. Go into the cities and clean them up. I would hope the mayors of those cities, like Tony Harp and Bill Fitch, would take more of an interest in cleaning up areas of their city that have been ridden with crime and ridden with drugs, that leads to this sort of disinterest in finding work, to be honest. So I would hope that those city leaders could find ways to promote jobs within the city, highly skilled, good paying jobs, trades, career schools, going back to high school, getting high school diplomas, things like that, that can really get somebody on the right track and onto a successful, self-fulfilling life.
And Ms. Stone, any ideas how we get our struggling cities going here in Connecticut?
Well, it all comes back to employment, and we all have ideas about how to increase employment and how to rev up the economy. But a rising tide floats all boats, and nothing could be truer in our cities. Creating employment opportunities and giving people the education they need to take advantage of them. We have many jobs across the nation that are unfillable with our present level of workforce training. And we need to look at where those jobs are and what training is needed to get people to fill the jobs. Now, when you hear a national figure of 3 million jobs that are not able to be filled because we don't have the right people with the right training in the right places to fill them, that's an alarming statistic. I also feel that in our cities, we still do not have good enough involvement of families with school systems so that the values of education are transmitted to children, and children learn that attendance in school and performance in school is the most important thing they can do for themselves and do to make their parents proud. This is something that we teach in our town. I learned it growing up. I find that too often families are not teaching these values, and schools, I think, need to do a better job of teaching them to families so that they can be transmitted to children. A child who values school and wants to spend time in school is going to become a successful high school graduate and go on to bigger and better things.
Thank you. And the next question is Ms. Stone, taking a 180-degree turn here. Would you ever consider approving the legalization of marijuana for recreational use? And Ms. Stone gets first crack at that one.
I'll say right off the bat, I don't think we're ready for that in Connecticut. However, there is a world of difference between the legalization of marijuana and the decriminalization of marijuana. And we spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in this state incarcerating people for relatively minor offenses. And I believe that this is a huge waste of taxpayer money, and these people ought to be back out if they did not commit a violent offense, and they ought to be productive members of society or have the chance to make themselves that. I don't think we can incarcerate our way out of the problems of mental health or drug abuse. I think we've got to really work at these problems at their source. And when parents talk to their children about drug abuse, it has to include tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, and harder drugs. They are part and parcel of the same bad habits that lead to a ruinous lifestyle. So I don't think we're ready for legalization yet. I don't know at what point we may be or may never be ready for legalization, but the criminalization of relatively mild hallucinogens is not doing us much good.
Your thoughts, Mr. Carney?
I would be opposed to legalizing recreational use of marijuana at this time. I do feel that medical marijuana, if you take what's good about the plant and using it towards people's health benefits, a woman told me from Old Saybrook, she's the mother of Avery, I don't know if you know Team Avery, she said that medical marijuana, actually using the oils from the plant, helped sustain her daughter's seizures. So I'm 100% behind that. I do think, though, that it's a little dangerous to think that decriminalization of certain drugs is the answer. I mean, that leaves a whole open window to selling drugs. If somebody sells a small amount of marijuana, is that part of the decriminalization? If somebody sells a small of marijuana or a small amount of a hallucinogenic drug to a school outside a school zone, which the majority party actually wanted to reduce the size of drug-free school zones, is that part of it? I think that it's dangerous to just go ahead and say, let's decriminalize it. There already are laws on the book that decriminalize folks who have a small amounts. They have to pay a small fine if caught, and that's fine. I don't want young people to have to go to prison because they were caught smoking marijuana or caught using some form of recreational drug. I don't think their lives should be ruined because of that by going to prison. But on the other end of the spectrum, I think selling drugs should be included in the criminalization, especially selling drugs to minors.
And just to clarify, Mr. Carney, so it sounds like you were okay with the current decriminalization of small amounts of marijuana, but your concern would be expanding that any further or to other drugs. Is that?
I think the current laws on the books are fine. I think people, when they're caught, they pay a small fine. I'm okay with that. You know, getting caught by a police officer is not going to be fun for anybody. So I think that would be a good lesson learned. But as I said, anything over what the current laws show, I would be hesitant to decriminalize that. You know, as Mary's talking about folks who've been, you know, drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and you know, I've been directly affected by that in my life with my family, a family member, and I know firsthand what that's like, firsthand how a gateway into that sort of a life. And I would focus on making sure that that doesn't happen to families, that doesn't happen to kids with their parents, that doesn't happen to parents with their kids. And I think that going ahead and decriminalizing it in the general sense that Ms. Stone has recommended is not the correct policy for families, it's not the correct policy for children, and it's not the correct policy for the 23rd District.
And Ms. Stone, anything you want to clarify or elaborate on with your comments?
Yes, I believe that my position on this issue was not summarized correctly by Mr. Carney. I am not in favor of selling pot. I'm not in favor of selling any restricted substances to minors. I have not advocated for reducing the size of the drug-free zone around schools. I simply think that the incarceration practices of the past for those who have possessed small amounts of drugs are draconian, and they are splitting up families and depriving society of useful members. And so I think we need to take a good look at our criminal statute and decide what is really worth prosecuting, what is worth spending our tax dollars going to court on. Let's be sensible people.
All right, this will be our last question, Mr. Carney, before we go to our closing statements. And the question I would like to know, what is your experience in public service, and how do you feel that experience suits you to the job of a legislator?
As I said in my opening, I've had experience working on political campaigns in the past, statewide campaigns. In addition to that, I've been a volunteer in the town of Old Saybrook for all my life, volunteering for the Shoreline Soup Kitchens, volunteering for the Old Saybrook Chamber of Commerce, volunteering for Gladeview, volunteering for the ASPCA. So I think that those are important aspects of my life, things I hold very dear. This is my first time running for political office, but as I said, there's a first time for everything. Someone always has to get that first loan. Somebody always has to get that first mortgage. So I think it's important that we have people up in Hartford that are relevant, that will understand what is going on with society in terms of how young people will have to shoulder the debt in the future, the outrageous unfunded pension liabilities that are really going to wreak havoc on folks that had nothing to do with it. Looking forward to newer technological advancements in education, in technology, in green jobs. All of that should come from new, fresh ideas up in Hartford, new, fresh faces. I am not a perpetual candidate. I have not run multiple times for offices and lost some of them. I think it's important that we get new ideas, fresh ideas up in Hartford, because right now we've got a lot of perpetual candidates, we've got a lot of career politicians, we've got a majority party that doesn't understand the needs and the wants of the 23rd District. And I think the district, even though this is my first time running for political office, the district would be served well by somebody that goes up there with a fresh point of view, with a new point of view, with a point of view of hope, with an independent mind, and that's what I would bring.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Stone, if you could discuss your public service and how you feel that prepares you for the job of a state lawmaker.
I started volunteering as soon as we moved to town 21 years ago. Our daughter was 2 years old at the time. The first thing I started doing was working for the Old Lyme Land Trust. Then I worked for the Florence Griswold Museum as a docent for 4 years and made 3 educational training films for them. I became involved with the Old Lyme Phoebe Griffin Noyes Library and eventually became president of the Friends of the Library for 3 years. We did substantial fundraising to bring the library into a new technological era. I'm very proud of that work. In 1997, our Board of Education was in a high degree of dysfunction, and these meetings had never been televised. I started videotaping them and televising them on public access TV and did that for 2 years. In 1999, I felt like I had enough grasp of the issues to run for public office, and I ran for my first term on the Board of Education and was the high vote getter. In 2003, I ran again for the Board of Education and was again the high vote getter. In 2011, I ran for my first term on the Zoning Board of Appeals and was elected as an alternate and then later appointed the same year as a full member. I'm now serving my second term on the Zoning Board of Appeals and also serve as an alternate on the Old Lyme's Open Space Commission. I've helped a number of other organizations in town. I volunteered for the Women's Exchange of Old Lyme for over 10 years. I was a founding member of the Community Coalition of St. Anne's Church, which focused on community values and behavior, and was a very worthwhile group that met for several years and sponsored forums. I've been a member of many other organizations in town. If you'd like a full list, please go to my public Facebook page, which is Mary Stone 2014. Otherwise, I would spend the next half hour telling you what I've done in the last 20 years.
All right, thank you. We now move to our closing statements. Both candidates have 1 minute, and we begin with Ms. Stone.
For you to make a good decision in this election, you need to know what makes us different from each other. And so I'd like to talk about what sets me apart as a candidate. I do not make huge, unrealistic promises just to get your vote. I can't do that. But I will work as hard as I possibly can as your full-time legislator to serve your needs and get the best results for our towns. I have shown the ability to lead and work hard with proven results. Everything I have accomplished in our towns, including renovating this very auditorium and the seats you're sitting in, has been because of my ability to work with others across party lines to make real and lasting changes. For state government to work, we must come together to find the compassionate, sensible, and lasting solutions that will serve us for years to come.
Thank you. And Mr. Carney, 1 minute.
Thank you to those who participated in this tonight. I hope it is apparent that I am the right person to represent the 23rd District up in Hartford. My opponent is a very nice lady, and I'm sure she would work hard, but we need to have balance in the legislature and move away from one-party rule to create compromise, to create better debate, and most importantly, to create public policy that really meets the needs and aspirations of Connecticut and its people. There needs to be a more diverse chorus up in Hartford, a better system of checks and balances. I would provide that as your next state representative. There is so much at stake in this election. We are near the bottom in so many things that are good. Our seniors are leaving and our youth is finding opportunity elsewhere. We need a state rep to carry on Maryland's legacy of strong constituent services and passionate public service while also being relevant for today's needs. It's time that my generation steps up and takes hold of the debt we will have to shoulder and the future of our state. I am asking for your vote on November 4th because I pledge to be an independent voice, your voice in Hartford. It's for our neighbors, it's for our families, and it's for our future.
All right, thank you. And now we can applaud for both candidates.